Good evening and welcome to the February 28th meeting of the Roseville Independent Redistricting Commission. The meeting is now called to order. Clerk, please call roll.
Borowiak? Here. Cuthbertson? Here. Frank?
Here.
Griffith? Here. Ludwig?
Here.
McPhail? Here. O'Keefe?
Here.
Waldrop?
Here.
Wagner?
Here.
Willoughby?
Here.
Commissioner Sweeney is absent. Alternate Donor? Kuhn? Slaughter? Slaughter's absent. Okay. You have a quorum.
Great. Commissioner Waldrop, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now open it up to public comments. If anybody would like to speak on anything not on the agenda, you're welcome to do so now. Seeing none, we'll close public comments.
We also have the remote telephonic public comment, so if we want to wait a few seconds for that, just in case.
I just got the signal that there's nobody calling right now. Is that correct? Correct. So we'll move on to item 5.1, minutes of prior meetings.
Good evening, everyone. Joe Mandel from the City Attorney's Office. I'm going to do a quick overview of these minutes real quick because I know that you have several meeting minutes in front of you right now. And I wanted to break these down just to sort of explain everything that we're looking at because our office and the city clerk's office couldn't prepare meeting minutes fast enough to then turn around and prepare agendas for the next meeting. And so we're to the point now where we're able to present some good minutes to you. And thank you to Helen for going over these meetings so many times. But just to reiterate, at our December 20th meeting, that's when the commission selected a group of 6 draft maps for further consideration at the 6 public hearings. So throughout January, all those meeting minutes, January 6th, 11th, 13th, 15th, 18th, 20th, are the public hearings related to that. January 24th is then the meeting where the commission voted to move draft map B1 forward. And so the meeting minutes for meetings on February 3rd, 9th, 15th, 17th, and 22nd are all the public hearings related to those. And so I just wanted to note for the record that all of the audio and video recordings for all of these meetings have been online since they happened. We're just now preparing the minutes for them. And so as you go through the several pages of minutes, you'll notice that we've noted where all the speakers got up and spoke and provided their comments. So that all of the is in there for the record. And also noting some of the meeting times of some of the meetings back in January were quite lengthy. And you will notice, I'm going to make a correction for the record for the meeting on January 24th. It actually notes the meeting adjourned at 12:50 p.m., but as we all know, it adjourned at 12:50 a.m. And so we'll make that correction for the record. And then also at the meeting on February 9th, Commissioner McPhail was not present, so we're going to remove that from the minutes. But other than that, I'm going to turn this back over to Chair Frank for any questions.
Thank you. We all have the minutes, and does anybody have any changes or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
We're going to take some public, if anybody has questions, public comment also.
Okay. We'll open it up to public comment on the minutes. Seeing none in the audience and none on the phone, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from January 6th through February 22nd, 2022?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of prior meetings.
Second? There's a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and call roll.
Borowiak?
Yes.
Cuthbertson?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Griffith? Yes. Ludwig?
Yes.
McPhail?
Yes.
O'Keefe?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Waldrop?
Yes.
Willoughby?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to reports and presentations, item 6.1.
Good evening, everyone. Again, Joe Mandel from the City Attorney's Office. And this is our big item on the agenda tonight, is to consider a resolution to adopt the final redistricting report and final map based on draft map B1. So I'm going to do a short presentation for you tonight on some of the items that we've seen before. And then I'm going to go into some of the details in the staff report and the resolution specifically that are before you today. So to get started, just some of the background about why we're here, the purpose of the Independent Redistricting Commission. Again, voters passed Measure R in the general municipal election on November 3rd of 2020, which establish the Independent Redistricting Commission and Article 11 of the Roseville City Charter. And so that Article 11 was to establish a redistricting process that's open and transparent and allows public comment on the drawing of city council district boundaries, ensures that the district boundaries are drawn according to the redistricting criteria set forth in the city charter and state and federal law, and ensures that the redistricting process is conducted with integrity, fairness, and without personal or political considerations. Every 10 years after the U.S. Census, the city of Roseville is required to reestablish the boundaries for its city council districts. And so in 2021, the Independent Redistricting Commission was created and made up of entirely community members to establish district boundaries in a process that's free from special interests and political influence. And our commission consists of 11 voting members and 5 non-voting alternates. The way that the commission was selected, this all again comes from what was approved in Article 11 by the voters, but the process for selecting the commission was that the city clerk randomly selected the initial 8 members from qualified applicants. What we did was basically draw a horizontal line through the city and a vertical line through the city to create 4 quadrants. And so of the qualified applicants, we did 2 from each quadrant, selecting the initial 8 members. And then those 8 randomly selected commissioners selected 3 at-large commissioners and 5 at-large alternates from the remaining applicants. And that selection process was based on the applicant's relevant analytical skills, ability to comprehend and apply the applicable state and federal requirements, familiarity with the city's neighborhoods and communities, familiarity with the city's demographics and geography, the ability to be impartial, and the apparent ability to work cooperatively with other commissioners. After the commission was selected, the commission selected a demographer to assist us with map drawing and demographer services. So in March of 2021, the city issued a request for proposals for demographer and mapping software redistricting services. In June of 2021, the Independent Redistricting Commission reviewed 3 proposals and made a recommendation for demographer services. And then in August of 2021, the city executed a professional services agreement with Flow Analytics to assist us with redistricting, election services, preparation of maps, district plan development, and plan presentation and implementation. And our demographer that we've been working with is Jed Roberts, and he is here and available tonight, and he's with us via Teams, and we'll get to him shortly. But hi, Jed. Good to have you here tonight. After selecting a demographer, we did a significant amount of training for the commission, and you can see the various types of training that we did for the commission. We had training on Brown Act, conflicts of interest, the Public Records Act. We had redistricting partners give a presentation on commissioners' role and federal and state redistricting laws. We looked into the Federal Voting Rights Act. We did a presentation on Redistricting 101, which went over the fundamentals of redistricting, the process, and how to analyze census data. We talked about how we would engage the community and also looked at the map-making tools and software and the use of the district scenario modeler software. So after all of that was done, we now get to look at drawing maps. And so there are some criteria that the commission needs to consider when drawing and approving a final map, and that's what these next couple slides are going to be. And this language again comes out of the city charter, Article 11, Section 11.09. And this talks about how the commission shall draw its final map so that council districts are substantially equal in population as required by the U.S. Constitution. The second item is that council district boundaries need to comply with the U.S. Constitution, the California Constitution, the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, and any other requirement of state or federal law that's applicable to a charter city. The commission also needs to consider the following 5 criteria that are set forth in this order of priority. Item number 1 in order of priority is, to the extent practicable, council districts shall be geographically contiguous. Item number 2 in order of priority, to the extent practicable, the geographic integrity of any local neighborhood association boundaries, or local community of interest shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. Item number 3 in order of priority, is that council district boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents, and to the extent practicable, council districts should be bounded by natural and artificial barriers, by streets, or by boundaries of the city. Item number 4, where it doesn't conflict with any of the other preceding criteria, council districts should be drawn to encourage geographical compactness in a manner that nearby areas of population are not bypassed in favor of more distant populations. And then item number 5 in order of priority is any other commission adopted criteria that doesn't conflict with these other requirements. And just to note for the record, there are no other commission adopted criteria. Moving on to a couple of other criteria that the Commission shall not consider. The Commission shall not adopt council district boundaries for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party, and the Commission shall not consider a place of residence of any individual, including any incumbent or political candidate, in the creation of a map. So those are the criteria that we look at in drawing a map and approving a final map. And now the next slides are going to talk about what we're here for tonight in the procedure for adopting the map. Again, this language comes out of the City Charter, Article 11. This one's at Section 11.10. Subsection A says that the Commission shall file a preliminary redistricting plan and draft map with the City Clerk, along with a written statement of findings and the reasons for adoption, which shall include the criteria employed in the process and a full analysis and explanation of the decisions made by the Commission. And the City Clerk shall publish the preliminary redistricting plan and draft map at least 30 calendar days prior to the adoption of a final redistricting report and final map. Again, we had that meeting on January 24th where the Commission moved forward draft map B1. The preliminary redistricting plan and draft map for draft map B1 were filed with the clerk on January 27th, 2022. And so now we are in the 30 calendar day period after publication where the Commission is required to hold at least 5 public hearings, including 1 public hearing in each existing council district. You can see throughout February, we had the 5 public hearings, 1 in each council district. All of these were to discuss draft map B1, and most of these meetings, I would say, were under 20 minutes long, and some of the final meetings, there was no public comment received. So we truly are hopefully getting to the final stages of this. And next slide, please. After having heard comments from the public on the preliminary redistricting plan and draft map, the Commission shall adopt a final redistricting report and final map. A Commission-adopted final redistricting report and final map has the force and effect of law and is effective 30 calendar days after it's filed with the City Clerk and shall remain effective until the adoption of new district boundaries after the next census in 10 years. And it's important to note that the City Council may not rescind, supersede, or revise the district boundaries adopted by the Commission. This slide's important because that's what we're doing here tonight. This is the final map adoption date for us to consider approving draft map B1 as the final map and finalizing and approving the final redistricting report. After the final map is adopted, the City Clerk's required to number each council district so that for as many residents as possible, the number of the council district they reside in remains the same. And I wanted to note that the way that draft map B1 is drawn now and presented to you, that's already been done by the City Clerk and by our demographer. And then finally, the final redistricting report and final map are subject to referendum in the same manner as ordinances. So with all of that procedural background behind us, the next slide is going to show what is draft map B1. This is draft map B1. Draft map B1 is an adjusted version of draft map B, and the adjustments that created draft map B1 were made by the Independent Redistricting Commission on January 24th at their meeting following a series of public hearings throughout January of 2022. And draft map B was originally published for public consideration on December 20th, 2021. You'll note that draft map B1 has an overall deviation of 9.4%. And just to note the differences between draft map B originally and draft map B1, you'll note are a small change in the bottom right-hand corner of District 4, and then a small change in the upper right-hand corner of District 2. So with that as background and part of my PowerPoint presentation, I'm now going to have us turn to my staff report and the resolution that are in front of you for your consideration tonight. So again, during this agenda item, the Redistricting Commission is here to consider whether to pass the attached resolution of the Independent Redistricting Commission of the City of Roseville, adopting a final redistricting report and final map. And that would adopt draft map B1 as the final map pursuant to subsection C of Article 11, Section 11.10 of the Roseville City Charter, and direct staff to file the final redistricting report and final map with the city clerk. So if we turn to the resolution itself, you'll note that there's several whereas paragraphs that talk about the various facts that at our January 24th meeting, the Independent Redistricting Commission selected draft map B1 as the final map, that the commission filed a preliminary redistricting plan and draft map on January 27th, and that we have had the required 5 public hearings. And now we're here to potentially consider a final map adoption. So when you see the now therefore be it resolved by the Independent Redistricting Commission of the City of Roseville that there are several findings that we're making, and one of them would be that we are in compliance with applicable law, and that the Commission has given consideration to the provisions and applicable decisions of the courts related to the Fair Maps Act of 2019 as amended in 2020. That's codified in California Elections Code 21500 to 21509. We've also looked at the provisions of Article 11 of the Roseville City Charter and any other state and federal law. And after giving consideration to those provisions and applicable decisions of the courts, the Redistricting Commission would hereby adjust, change, and establish the district boundaries for the Roseville City Council as set forth in draft map B1, and that they would constitute and are hereby established as the boundaries of city council districts of the City of Roseville for subsequent elections until readjustment is required by law in 10 years. And so we would be making that finding that we would be in compliance with the law. And I also wanted to note that if draft map B1 were approved as the final map, the effect on incumbent candidates are that for each incumbent council member, they will continue during the remainder of that council member's term to represent the electoral district to which the council member was elected prior to the redistricting. So this isn't going to change any existing districts until the next election. And then I also wanted to note, just for the record, because this is in section 11.14 of Article 11 of the Roseville City Charter that talks about dissolution of the commission. And so if this resolution is passed, this would also make it so that 91 days following approval of the final redistricting report and final map, the Independent Redistricting Commission would cease operations and dissolve unless there's a referendum filed. So that would officially dissolve us if we approve the final map tonight. And I file it with the city clerk's office tomorrow. That would be March 1st. It would be effective March 31st, and we would dissolve on May 30th. So with all of that as background, I'm going to turn it back over to the chair for any questions and then move into some public comment.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any questions from commissioners regarding this presentation? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open it up to public comment on item 6.1. Any members of the public present or by telephone? How are you tonight?
Good. Good evening, everyone. And I'm glad, I think I see smiles on all your faces because this is coming, this process has been a long and a difficult one for you. And I'm sure you've learned a great deal about what redistricting means and the best ways to do it. And we in the public appreciate all of the efforts you've put in because there's been many meetings that you've had to sacrifice and being away from families and friends. And we can't owe you enough debt of gratitude for all of the hard work that you've put in. But I know that I just heard that you don't officially end until May 30th. Is that what I heard? Well, we had prepared, my wife and I had prepared a little bit of souvenir for you to take with you as a memento for all of the efforts you've put in. So we're going to pass this out to you, and we'll conclude with the remarks.
Get it done in less than 3 minutes.
Do we have to report these gifts?
$60.
Thank you so much.
She's not here, so let's take this one.
Yeah,
we'll take it.
we'll take it. Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Couple more here.
If anybody's not here, we can make sure that they get them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen and Amy.
It's just a little memento. It's one of a kind for each of you, so it's priceless. Okay? So thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, still no one on the phone. Commissioners, any comments regarding item 6.1? No comments. I'd like to seek a motion to pass resolution to adopt draft map B-1 as the final map and direct staff to file the final redistricting report and final map with the city clerk.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Clerk, call roll.
Rosiak?
Yes.
Cuthbertson?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Griffith?
Yes.
Ludwig?
Yes.
McPhail?
Yes.
O'Keefe?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Waldrop?
Yes.
Willoughby?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Exciting.
Any other comments
All right.
from staff?
Smiling over here, but then the next item is where we can talk about more of the process. Yes. It's great.
So we'll move on to item 6.2, roundtable discussion.
Thank you again, everyone. Joe Mandel from the City Attorney's Office. Congratulations on, adopting a final map. I will, as I mentioned, I will prepare the final map. I had a couple of blanks to fill in of what the final vote was going to be and what the actual day is that we'll file it. But it looks like tomorrow I will be able to file it with the clerk's office. And again, it'll be effective March 31st. Chair Frank and I are going to be making a presentation to City Council probably on March 16th, and all of you are welcome to join if you'd like to, just to talk about the redistricting process and the adoption of draft map B1 as the final map. And so this item 6.2, is really for us to just do a debrief of the whole redistricting process. I know we've been together for a long period of time. We shared COVID together. We have become great friends after not knowing each other at all, because that's what's been great about this commission, is it truly was independent from everything that we've done. So I have a staff report that has a couple of ideas for some things that we can talk about, but really I'm going to open it back up to Chair Frank to sort of, if anyone would like to talk about pros and cons of things that went well, things that could be improved. We have a charter review commission that meets every 10 years to consider revisions to the charter. And so if there are some clarifications or things that you feel could be edited in this Article 11 that would make the next redistricting process run a little bit cleaner or smoother, or clarify a couple of things, then we are all ears, and I'm going to turn it back to Chair Frank for getting the discussion started.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and do commissioner questions, public comment, and then commissioner comments. So are there commissioner questions about the presentation? Seeing none, any member of the public like to share any views about the process with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Einer Maish. I think you guys have done a great job. Thank you for your service. I had just I have a letter. I've been collecting thoughts, but I'm just going to share a couple of them with you before and then hand it over to Joe Mandel. One of them is that I think that the commission should be politically balanced. And so what I mean by that is the city council is a nonpartisan position, and it should remain so. But drawing political boundaries is a manifestly political act, and political parties are going to want to take an interest in the outcome and try to affect the outcome. And I think we saw a little bit of that this time. And so I think one of the requirements should be that the number of people should be politically balanced on the board. It's my suggestion. The second one that I wanted to mention is that I think it's more important to create districts that maximize common interest among the residents within the district rather than minimize the division of neighborhood associations. And I think we saw some maps that sort of highlighted that in spades. And anyway, those are two of my comments.
Thank you. I am going to comment on Mr. Mesh's first comment. There is a section in Article 11, Section 11.06 that talks about qualifications and restrictions of commissioners, and the only requirement related to political party preferences says the commission shall not be comprised entirely of members who are registered to vote with the same political party preference. So that question was asked of all of you. I can confirm that is not the case on this commission, but thank you for that comment.
Any other members of the public like to speak on the process we've undergone?
Hi, I'm Susan Rohan, and also want to thank you very much for the work that you did. My comment is probably more of a question. Who came up with the form, the community interest form? There was a drop-down. I thought it was very rigid. It was not. I chose not to use it because it seemed so terribly restrictive.
I believe that form came from our demographer Flow Analytics subcontracted with a firm called Redistricting Partners, and so Redistricting Partners created that form for the city, and then the city turned it around just from a graphic standpoint, but there are definitely some suggested edits that we've received on that community of interest form for ways that we can
I think it ought to visit the planning department.
Yes.
For a little bit more work next time around.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, are there any phone calls? Seeing none, we'll close public comment on item 6.2. Now open it up to commissioners for comments. Any suggested changes, things you would, if you're going to be on the commission in 10 years, what you'd like to do differently?
This will be older then.
I'll speak. I think we can all say that we felt that our hands were tied with regard to the adoption language saying that a map would be publicized, and it made no mention of making changes to a map or maps during that period. And if there was not a perfect map, there was no intention of making any sort of changes. It doesn't make sense to have a comment period if you're not able to make changes. So I think that, it kind of created a circular problem there. So the language could be improved in that area too, because we're supposed to be given the responsibility and the power to make the decision on the map. But obviously the wording on the adoption section 1110 made that difficult for us, hence the extra 30 days and all. And then in regards to the redistricting criteria, honestly, there's a couple of things in there that seem kind of silly to me. One is where it says areas that are separated by a rail yard or highway are not contiguous, but we're a city with a railway that makes a Y in the middle of it. It's not possible to make the districts match that, and then we have 2 highways going through it. So the extent practicable is, that makes that sort of like, I don't know, unnecessary. The other thing that's unnecessary is section B3, the last sentence says, to the extent practicable, council districts shall be bounded by natural and artificial barriers, by streets, or by the boundaries of the city. And I don't think it needs to say by the boundaries of the city. That's kind of obvious. And then, but that language was probably taken from a county or state language, which would make sense in that case. But here, we are the city. So I think it would be better stated to say that stress artificial barriers and major streets. That would be my thought there. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other members of the commission?
I would just echo what Karen said about the areas that are separated by a rail yard or a highway are not contiguous. It just didn't make sense for Roseville. It's like highway, rail yard. Like you can't even, there was no way. I mean, I know the language says to the extent practicable, but it just seemed like it shouldn't be there, or it should be changed so that it's makes more sense for our geography.
A lot of the language comes from state law provisions, and there are some additions in there, and one of those is that language related to the rail yard specifically for in Roseville. So we definitely understand that our office was subject to some interpretation, issues, and so I'm also curious about as we have this conversation about the idea of draft map versus draft maps, and how do we want to have multiple maps and narrow it down from there, or do we want to only have one map, and how what is a minor edit or what is a tweak? Because the interpretation that we made was basically that if there is a portion of the population that's going to be affected by any tweak, then that would be considered a new draft map under the interpretations of the law. And so that's why, out of an abundance of caution, we did an additional 30 days and 5 public hearings. So if there is some suggestions that the commission would have as anything for us to consider moving forward, or to suggest to the Charter Review Commission when they consider this language.
And Chair Frank, I'd like to offer a contrasting opinion in terms of the overall function of this body as a deliberative and decision-making body. The way that I read this body to come into being and act is to take all of the maps that the public had provided to us and begin the down selection of viable maps based on applicable law, Voting Rights Act, and other charter provisions that were in front of us. And we would continue that down selection process until we arrived at the best possible map, not necessarily that we would continue the process of creating maps. So it struck me as different that we would be both the makers and the deciders. It put us on both sides of that table. I think that we wanted to volunteer to get to the best possible, everyone here obviously did, to get to the best possible outcome that we could. But at some point I felt that there was a shift, and we started to become authors instead of arbiters. Instead of making a decision of the best possible option that we had in front of us, we started to change things. And I don't think we came to the point in understanding of what an actual tweak was until fairly late in the process, and that anything affecting population was indeed a tweak and a new map. So that did bring clarity in the moment. That helped us a lot. I appreciate that. But my vision of this when I put my application in was that there would be a universe of maps, and we would start whittling it down, and it would be a funnel that we could make the best possible choice from. That wasn't the case, but that would be something that, as we look forward into the future, I believe it was our very long meeting where I asked the question, is there a perfect map? And it does depend on who you ask, but it's unlikely that you will satisfy every possible constituency in a city with one map. I believe it to be highly improbable. My observation is that is this body one that makes a decision or makes the maps? We took on both roles, and I think some clarity in the language going forward would be really helpful to the next version of this body that gets incorporated.
Can I add on to just that part?
she had asked me
Okay, and then I
asked
want to
before,
add on
yeah.
to Jeff's.
Kind of a contrasting viewpoint in terms of which on January 24th, when we narrowed down to the set of maps that we were looking at, one of the things I liked about having multiple maps was that I thought the maps, I think we could have gone with 4 rather than 5 because the last 2 were pretty similar, but they all looked at a slightly different approach. You know, I don't think there's one best map necessarily. There might be, depending on what approach you take to how you divide things up, there might be 2 or 3 good maps. And I liked the idea of being able to go out and get public feedback saying which approach does the public prefer among the ones we're looking at. And it seemed that one of the things that we were listening for, in addition to the differences in approach between the maps, was also the small tweaks. Because there were neighborhoods that were divided, you know, the Sierra Vista historic area and things, you know, and there were things like that that we just didn't know what we didn't know before we started. And I'm not sure it's practicable to be able to expect us to choose a map as is from.
Not if you're going to give public comment.
Exactly.
The purpose of
Yeah.
public comment.
Exactly. We
is
need to learn what we don't know
make
before
whatever
we can make a
changes
decision.
based on that.
And
I
so
disagree
We still have 11
fundamentally.
opinions. It's
Yeah.
not one person making the decision. It's still 11 people
Right.
voting on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
But that public comment could be, again, the map that we chose could have been submitted. It wasn't, and I hear
yeah, I'm
exactly
just
what
thinking,
what you're
yeah.
saying, and we've all.
I
we've
don't
all
think it's
lived it.
unreasonable to assume that any map that is submitted probably could be made a little bit better by the tweaking. And I don't think that's out of the realm of what we ought to be expected to do, listening to the public comment that we get.
Renee?
My part that I wanted to add is I thought it got a little confusing for me. We had the map deadline for submission, and then people were already making tweaks that were submitted and considered before we even got to the editing stage. And I think that just kind of mushroomed out, and how the one night in December where it was, well, then let's just take the 20. And then there was the confusion about, well, I tried to, is it a map? Is it another map? Is it a tweak of a map? So I think for me, if we had been able to just say there are no maps, no changes at all until we got to that night, would have been helpful.
another approach would have been, if we knew then what we know now, is taking a little more time up front on the 5 maps or the 6 maps that we considered to pre-tweak them, if you will, before we published them, to fix those little, maybe I was too much into the weeds on the detail, but I knew some of those maps had those faults on them, and I figured we'd be changing them later, so I didn't bring it up before. But I know we did do some changes on, was it map A at the very beginning before we submitted it? There was one little corner that we fixed, I think it was a little Sun City corner or something, that didn't move any people, and we could have done that to all of those maps. Had we known it was going to create another 30-day, problem at the end, we could have made them more perfect from the get-go and said, these are the 6 maps, and we're going to take one of them as is, based on public comment. I mean, that's another approach, I suppose.
I kind of went into it thinking we'd have the ability to do more on-the-fly changes in our final meeting, and it didn't. I guess the mapping software didn't really apply to that like I assumed that it did. But for me, after we got through the whole thing, I thought, no, I liked the fact that we were able to come up with, in our case, 6 maps. We got all the public input And then we came back and debated that, and I think we came to the best map based on everything we had heard through those 30 days and through those public meetings. So I don't know that just going out and saying, pick one of these 6 public, because that's what we've got. I don't know that that's fair, because someone said, we don't know what we don't know until we're in that process and getting feedback from the people who live in all of these individual communities that we're trying to review, and we're going to ultimately be impacting for 10 years.
So just one single suggestion, that once the map or maps, draft maps are voted upon, that you have another session, just to, where we could, it would have been nice to have that second session after we picked the 6 maps. And I think that would be the one suggestion I would bring forward.
I have a comment. One thing I would say is the public had a huge input as to the final result. And it was the impact was very, very important, essential. But I think the public comment came too late. I think the public comment should have been as the maps were being created, so that the maps could be adjusted at that time. And then we narrow it down to get to the 1 map, 3 maps, whatever maps. But to do tweaks after we've already decided starts the clock again for the 30 days. So it would be better, I would think, to have public input as the maps are being drawn to begin with, and then we select the map that we think is going to be the best.
I think we were, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think we ended up with a shorter time frame than they're going to end up with 10 years from now, assuming we don't have another pandemic at the time.
Yeah, I just think the last 5 public hearings we've had, they seemed quite unnecessary, right? I mean, we're in and out in under 10 minutes in most of them. I feel like I'm okay with multiple draft maps. I'm okay with, all the public hearings and all the districts, getting feedback on those maps and even suggestions to change maps, or I'm even okay with getting an email saying you should consider this new map that no one ever thought of. But then I think us as a commission, when we have all that information, all that public feedback, we should be able to take all that and on that last day kind of coalesce all that and come up with a final map and say that's the map and that has all the public input that it needs.
Or at the very least, go with one hearing after I'm not sure the whole hearing in every district was necessary, given the amount of feedback we were getting at that point.
Because I think the public comment was so robust leading up to that.
Yeah, and then
that
afterwards,
everybody sort of had their say.
Yeah.
There is a provision in state law that says if we're going to make a draft or a change to the draft map, it has to be published on the city's website, and it needs to be published for at least a week before you have it for final adoption. But again, our city charter had more restrictive language, and in order to follow that, so that's something good to note, that if we are narrowing it from all of them down to 5 or 6, then we have multiple public hearings. And then if we are narrowing it down even further, if there's some charter language that could be considered in 10 years to determine how many more public hearings to have, once we've sort of funneled it down and narrowed it down, that's important to know. So thank you.
Warner and Christine, do you have any comments?
I just echo Commissioner Waldrop's comments. I think that was a better approach, to get the public comment before we start, choosing the maps.
Which might help your approach too, if we're making the changes before we get to the final decision-making process, and then we're done, and then make the decision after that. That might partly deal with your.
It absolutely might, and as I read through my notes on each one of the meetings, the first 2 of our public meetings, our public comment was focused on the maps that were in front of them, not on maps with tweaks. So I felt a little bit like those folks who had the kind of the early look at our deliberative process. They saw an option of one of six. Then we started to get to one of six plus infinity, depending on the number of tweaks that we were poised potentially to make. So the folks that were in districts 1 and 2 got a different flavor of not only what I think the baseline expectation was, but also of how our dynamic as a commission developed as well. So we started to talk about the 6 maps pretty fundamentally differently. It had been, I think, flown at some early point in time that we might be able to make these tweaks. We weren't at that time sure what a tweak really consisted of, but we ended up finding that out. So having that a little bit more well-defined would be really helpful, I think, as well. There's a subsection of the charter that we talked about a little bit as well, an 11.09B5. Other criteria as, and I can't quote it, but other criteria as decided on by the commission, something along those lines. One thing that became a point of conversation pretty frequently was voter deceleration. We had 3 or 4 euphemisms for it throughout the course of this, but that deferral, there was disenfranchisement. There were a whole bunch of words used out there. Yeah, they were all alliterative. They all started with a D. So, but that might be something when this body is revived to list as a potential option within that subsection, so that even if they choose not at that time to view it, it will be a data point that was made available to us. It'll be something that the staff can ask for in advance, so that
it might even be something worth asking the demographer to talk about the potential implications, and if it's skewed too much one way, is that going to make it worse than the next decennial? And I mean, we didn't know enough about that before we started, and having that be part of the education process might be helpful.
And we talked a lot about the next census, and I'm not sure we should have. I'll just throw that out there, because we have to make a point-in-time decision, and it has to be with what we have now and the folks we have living in the places that we have now. That came up several times, and I thought, but wait, this is about 2020 census, right? We're now a little bit past that, but again, point of clarity and training potentially about the impacts of future growth. You may want to keep an eye on them, but your decision needs to be made based on the facts that we have in front of us today.
One more thing, maybe for Joe, if you're giving the presentations next 10 years from now.
You see that happening?
I thought maybe there was a little bit of confusion with the public in terms of the census tracts and how we were sort of handcuffed and exactly where lines could get drawn.
Okay.
That it might be worth sort of adding that as one of your bullets to just sort of really hammer that home to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with Ryan on that. I think that was confusing for some members of the public, and for me in the early part of the process. I didn't, the information that we were getting from the consultant was, this neighborhood association is intact, even though there would be, part of a census block that cut it. So it actually wasn't everybody, even though it was 25 homes or something like that. So it was a little bit confusing. I think if it was confusing for me, then it was probably confusing for people that were kind of, had one foot in the process. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I think that kind of timing in this whole process, having more time if there hadn't been the pandemic and getting the census data would have given us an opportunity to kind of tweak things a little bit more before we did the public hearings, whether a future commission decides to have one map or 2 or 3 maps. I do have a question. Would it be possible at some point if we had a subcommittee maybe 3 or 4 of us, we get together, make the tweets, and then come back? Would that have worked or been helpful?
I agree with that. One of the things that I thought when I got on this commission was that I would be working on the computer and doing maps. And just for physical reasons, I wasn't able to participate in that part of the process. To be working closely with somebody, a group of people on the table, would have been very rewarding for me to be able to participate more in the drawing. So.
And then also in terms, kind of in that same interactive vein, in terms of the public comment, had there been, stickers, and I know we didn't want to vote or take a poll, but to get a sense in that way in terms of how people liked maps, is that a good idea or a bad idea? Because then you have stickers accumulating for the 5th or 6th meeting, and then people might be swayed by all of that as well. Joe, do you think that the future commission in 10 years and staff in 10 years can do the things that we've kind of suggested without having to change the charter itself?
I think if we broadly interpret the other commission-adopted criteria that doesn't conflict with other requirements and criteria listed in this section or other state and federal law that Jefferson paraphrased perfectly earlier, I think if you look at that to talk about your voter deferral, looking at impacts of future growth, that might be an area that you can explore, that the next commission could explore. A lot of this, again, we are sort of handcuffed by what the language was that was approved by the voters and then our interpretation of how we had to implement that. And so this is us all doing it for the first time. And these are excellent suggestions for moving forward for next time. And we will compile all these in the clerk's office and keep them coming, because we will, have this submitted to both the Charter Review Commission and for the Independent Redistricting Commission several years from now when that does take place.
Because I thought there was, like was said earlier, some language in there in the charter that doesn't really apply to Roseville, like ferry service.
Right.
I don't think
and again, that's cut and paste straight out of state law, and so that's what the Charter Review Commission decided to, when they were determining what are going to be the redistricting criteria, they took that language and put it into our city charter, adding in, again, some of that language about rail yard.
I know we've talked about trying not to have a second set of 5 meetings. Now, the first set of meetings, we did have 6. Did you guys feel that was, did we need it? Could we have stuck with 5 and maybe had the District 2 public hearing here on a Saturday? Would that have, because I know we added one to get the Saturday in.
I think that was actually a really great meeting to be at, and an option that some folks wouldn't have been able to make otherwise. It may not need to be written in, but as optionally from a staff perspective, they can offer it up. That would be a great thing.
We've had one of the 5 be on a Saturday, rather than make a 6th one.
Yes.
Sure.
And then the only other comment I have is, as chair, if future chair gets a little bit more guidance in terms of administrative rules,
Like so you don't
that would be
violate the Brown
helpful,
Act.
so I don't violate.
Can I make one
Noted.
additional comment? To take Einer's suggestion, I think one of the charter sections mentioned that one of the priorities is neighborhood associations. And I think what was a little bit difficult was we don't draw the neighborhood associations. We don't have anything to do with it. I don't even know who does. But some are active, others, most of them are not. And I don't know if they ever get redrawn, but in the public comments, there was a lot of people that said, well, we associate with Blue Oaks, not Fitterment Farm, or vice versa. And that's just one example. Or saying we were in Quail Glen, and we don't have a lot in common with Caseburg. So those things, I don't know, I mean, we don't have control over that, but I think somewhere there needs to be a clarification as to what that charter statement means as a priority, as neighborhood association. It doesn't have to follow the neighborhood associations. It can follow more of the community of interest. We just kind of assumed a community interest was a neighborhood association, and that might not be true. So it came out in the public comments, and that made it really difficult to be able to draw these lines, because there was the census blocks, there was the neighborhood associations. Some were split, like Stone Ridge was, half of that neighborhood association felt like they should be in District 1, and the others said that they should be in District 2. So, and when you get that, you start to get that not contiguous. I work so hard to pronounce contiguous. So it makes a difference, I think, as far as neighborhood associations go. I don't know if that's something for the city council to decide, Arcona, that commission, but maybe it'd be better to make the neighborhood associations bigger or more in common than they are now.
Or maybe just establish what the priorities among the different criteria should be. Maybe neighborhood association shouldn't be quite so high a priority.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and I think I made that point a couple times. It's like, yeah, I understand there's this Arcona line here, but I know this person, interacts with that person, and this line is just a line on paper. That's not the reality of the neighborhood. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way. Is maybe it's just not the top, such a high priority.
And some of those were not accurate either. They picked up little corners that didn't belong to that neighborhood association, but that was just how the parcel maps were drawn or something from the very beginning. Picking major roadways or natural boundaries is one way that you're probably going to correct a lot of that. That's my thinking.
Joe, is that language copied and pasted directly from state language with the exception of the neighborhood association, comma?
I believe it's the same as what's in state law, exactly. Yeah, I can look it up in a moment. I can look
To the
up.
extent practicable, does a ton of heavy lifting in each one of those paragraphs.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Any other comments from commissioners? This is not an action item, so we don't need any vote on it. Before we move to adjourn, I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much to the public that's here tonight, as well as the public that came during the course of this process. It was amazing and great to meet new people and hear different points of view, and hopefully everyone still remains friends after the process or even makes friends during the process. To staff, thank you all for juggling so much and making sure we stayed on task as much as possible. And now you can move on to other fun things for the city. And then obviously for the alternates and the commissioners that we all served with, it was a pleasure and an honor for myself. And I feel very pleased to be able to make 10, 11, 12 new friends during this process. So thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm gonna jump in before you offer that up. I just want to say congratulations and thank you to all of you. You guys are a wonderful group who's always prepared thoughtful questions. As a Roseville resident myself, I'm very proud of the work that we've all done. I know that efficiency isn't always what's going to happen out of all of these meetings, but getting it right, getting it done fairly, and under budget, and I'm very proud of the way that all of this has worked out with this group. I want to thank Helen Dreyer from the clerk's office for all of her help throughout all of this, and Katrina Six in the back. Everybody in the public affairs and communications group, Brian, Stephanie, Lindsay, all of their help, and a couple of Lindsay Duck and Brian Jacobson have helped us prepare these certificates of appreciation for each one of the commissioners that we'll pass out after the meeting. That says City of Roseville Certificate of Appreciation from the people of the City of Roseville to Commissioner name, and has your term of service as well as the map, the final map that was adopted. And so that's our little thank you to each one of you from the clerk's office for serving on the commission. And as Chair Frank said, I think we all have a big group of friends now, more than 12. You have to include us over here too, and then all of the alternates as well. So we have at least 20 friends plus everybody that showed up at each one of these meetings. Thank you to the public, and that's what I have to comment on.
Joe, what happens with the map that was out in the lobby?
We do have, I believe, maps out here, and we would like to keep some of those as souvenirs, and so thank you for bringing that up. One thing that we'd like to do is we'd like to get each one of the commissioners to sign those, and if we can scan them in some way and get them over to you guys, that would be great. Otherwise, we're going to have some great trophies in our offices and in city buildings as well, and we would love to have your signatures on it for, like I said, a little trophy for next time. Thank you.
We have some flow on the line still.
We still have to have public comment
flow on the line.
on that.
Is Flo still on the line?
I believe, Jed Roberts, are you there by any chance?
I am here.
All right.
Been very quiet.
Anything?
We didn't want to ignore him.
He's
There's
still
Jed.
getting paid. so-
Anybody have any comments for Jed before we move on to the next item of adjournment? Because since we were talking about, a roundtable discussion of some things that we can do differently or better, any comments or questions to the demographer?
I would say thank you for being so easy to work with and accommodating with all the changes, just like so fast. So.
I would echo that. We've had a great relationship working with Jed, and so the meetings that we have, when we normally have meetings of this commission on a Monday, we always have a meeting on Tuesday morning with at least Helen, Jed, and I, and Brian, and those are always great discussions. And so I'm going to miss some of those. I'm going to miss this group. A little tear in my eye about all this.
I think Jed is amazing, actually. I mean, his familiarity with our streets and the commissioners and the map drawers. I was really impressed with Jed. I mean, he really dived deep and had a deep knowledge of our city.
Yeah.
Jed, anything else?
I've worked with a handful of, I'm getting a little echo, but a handful of commissions, and I got to say I really enjoyed the spirit. Very cooperative. I don't think I can say it a lot better than Joe. I kind of wish that he had the last word here, but really a great group to work with. So thank you all, and happy to be able to get to do my job with folks that are so invested in a process like this. So great work.
All right, I seek a motion to adjourn to 2031.
Chair Frank, I'd like to move for adjournment.
Have a second.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
All ayes?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
All right.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Yay.
Congratulations. Thank you all.
Okay.